Recorded live on the turf at Mad Lab Training Studio in Eldersburg, Maryland. This is the Time to Win podcast with Alex and Dan. Now let's get this podcast started.
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Today, Dan, is the best day of my entire life.
That's a surprise to me. I've never heard you say that before.
No, man. Every day is awesome.
Every day is.
So I've got all kinds of stuff to do. Like, my garden is going crazy, right? I already told you that. It's a topic of frequent conversation. So the garden's going crazy, and I got to thinking, I've got stuff planted in my garden, and I have no idea when it's time to harvest, right? So I looked it up, and I think the radishes are ready to harvest. So when we're done with this podcast, I'm going to go home and harvest, at least pull some radishes and see what they look like.
I'm not even really sure what a radish is, in all honesty.
It's something you buy at the supermarket in the produce section, and they're red.
Okay.
And they come in bunches, sometimes in bags, right? And they're a little
not in murders like crows.
Right.
Murder of radishes.
Or pods like whales.
Fair enough.
No, they come in bags, and sometimes in bunches, right? Like if you go to the farmer's market, you're going to buy a bunch of radishes. They'll be tied together with a string or a rubber band or something, right? Anyway, I've got radishes, right? And they're great in salads. They're actually great to roast, but I don't know many people that roast radishes. There you go.
I didn't even know what a radish was.
Well, now you know. And you know what, Dan? If you listen to this podcast long enough, you will learn everything that you need to know.
Everything you need to know.
Because the whole topic of this podcast is how to win.
How to win.
And sometimes you need to know stuff to win. So I want to know some things about you, Dan.
Yes.
Mike, are we ready to go? Are we rolling tape at this point? Okay. So, Dan, I want to ask you some questions, right?
Okay.
And the format of this question is, I'd rather blank than blank.
I remember you kind of previewing it a bit for me.
Okay, so I got to thinking about this, and I have some strong opinions on certain topics. But what I realized was I was asking the wrong question. Like, Alex, would you rather this or that? Or I was framing the whole conversation around what I want. And so I thought about this last night. I decided to recast it as what you want, and then we can go with that. So I'm gonna hit you with a couple of rapid fire questions, right? Coke or Pepsi?
Coke.
Okay. Boxers or briefs?
Ooh, a
and time's up.
I have two different answers for that.
Yeah, I mean, you can even throw out a third answer, right?
Yeah.
You can say neither. I don't know. Maybe you're a commando guy. But
depends on the day. Depends on what's going on.
Yeah, right. Okay. Well done or rare?
Rare.
Okay. Beer or wine?
Wine.
All right. Okay. So now it's going to get a little trickier. You got you warmed up. You ready? You warmed up. You're flexing and everything.
Mobile. Yeah.
Dan, would you rather be lucky or good?
Didn't we do that? Did we say this before?
Well, we might have, but we didn't do it. We weren't rolling tape when we did it.
I think I'd rather be good.
Yeah. Okay. How come?
Because this is kind of a long answer. I feel like if you're looking for just pure results, right, and just like very binary results, right, then being lucky is probably better. However, if you're looking for like some other factors, then I think being good is better. Because if you're good, then people recognize that you're good. You get the feeling like you belong in whatever you're doing, right? Where if you're just lucky, you're just kind of like, will the next thing happen? And there's always some general worry attached to it, right? Because if you're just lucky and not good, then at some point you would think that you would know that you're lucky and not good, right? Other than just saying it to be humble.
So I've changed my opinion on this, right? I used to say I'd rather be lucky than good.
You did.
And I've changed my mind on this, right?
Okay.
I would rather be good also.
I changed your mind.
Yeah, you might have. You might have. I defended my earlier choice by saying I've known a lot of people that were good at what they did, but they failed, right?
Yes.
For whatever reason, maybe a combination of bad luck. But I've got this friend, Fiddler, and he says there's no such thing as luck, right? And I disagree with him, like winning the lottery is not a game of skill. Okay.
If you said there was no such thing as luck, then you would also say that there are no random events, and you would also say that you believe in only fate.
And fate is just another wrapping on predestination. I don't know. It kind of undercuts free will a little bit.
Well, that's what I would say.
But then maybe that's a different topic for a different podcast. Okay.
I don't know.
I mean, I'm not. I didn't do my homework on that topic, so it'll just be a stream of consciousness if we talk about that.
I think that's always the best kind.
But my friend Fiddler, he said, I don't believe in luck. I believe that.
Well, does he believe in fate?
Yeah. Well, he's one of these guys that he's kind of like, the world is black and white, and there's very little gray in the world. And with me, I'm like, there's very little black and white in the world. I think the world is almost all gray.
Yeah, that's why we said operating in gray areas.
Yeah.
Best bet.
But I feel if you're really good, you are in effect creating your own luck, right? I think I didn't make this line up. I heard somebody else say it, but it was something to the effect of, the better I get, the luckier I turn out.
Because you're improving your odds of whatever. So if you improve your odds, then obviously more times something will hit that's good.
Yeah. Okay, so kids, if you're listening to the podcast right now, at this point, you have your pencils out. You've got your notebooks open, and you're taking points. And you got to ask yourself the question, would you rather be lucky or good? And the advice of this podcast is, it's better to be good than it is to be lucky. And it's even better to be really, really good.
But also you can't control it. It's not like you can control luck. Like if there were certain factors of which you can control luck, then you'd be like, all right, it's better to be lucky than good.
Yeah.
And then I need to go be lucky.
Yeah.
Not go get lucky, but go be lucky.
So, I'm a church-going guy, right?
Yes.
And if you go to church long enough, you start hearing stories of miracles, right?
Right.
And I had to have a sit-down with some of my friends at church one time, and I said, hey, miracles are cool, and they're always nice when they happen, but counting on miracles is a terrible strategy for winning. Okay, we need to create our own luck. So
we need to create our own luck.
All right, pound it, Dan. I think we're on the same page,
Perfect.
at least for the moment. Okay, let's see here, Dan. Would you rather be sore or sorry?
Better to be sore than sorry. I read that on a shirt one time. And anything I read on a shirt, I believe at 100%. I'd say.
All right, we're going to check that one off. I think I was the guy that wore that shirt that day.
It's very possible.
I'd rather be sore than sorry. But that's like another way of like creating your own luck, right? I'd rather go out there and do the work and pay a small price up front than regret it later on, right? And I think that's what sore is just a metaphor, right? Sore is a metaphor for getting in there and doing the work, right? Whether it's
regardless of failure.
Right. Yeah. It's got nothing to do with failure. In fact, winning has nothing to do with failure. Because if you're creating your own luck and you're out there grinding and you're getting better every day, you're going to fail sometimes. All right, pencils up. Right, that's a point. You're going to fail sometimes.
Mike,
right?
You got to take note over there. I didn't get a chance to come in and bother Mike. So I feel strange that I haven't really come in and trolled him. I heard Bob Kennedy was in here earlier though.
Well, you can troll producer Mike. I don't know, probably pretty much anytime you want.
Fair enough.
I've got this buddy Sweets, and we troll this guy.
Oh, I know.
All the time.
Wake up.
Right? Wake up, Sweets. Okay, so you'd rather be sore than sorry, right? Being sore is a metaphor for doing the work, putting the work in so that you can get good, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's okay, and sometimes you're going to fail. You brought that up, right?
But I think failure is the way that human beings learn the best. And I think that is, obviously catastrophic failure is catastrophic.
Well, yeah, you get to do that one once.
Right. So, but in all, like, that's how I feel like it's been proven over and over again throughout history that failure is the best way to learn anything.
Yeah, failure's hard, right? You don't want to fail. Mm-hmm. And it sucks when you do, right? And I think failure is a great motivator. Right?
It is.
Because I don't want to do that again. I don't want to feel that way. I don't want to have that sensation. I want to learn from that so it never happens to me again, right?
But if you have a good tolerance to failure, then you're going to improve more rapidly than somebody that doesn't.
Or I don't know about tolerance, right? Like tolerance means, I can fail over and over and over again on the same thing, right? I don't know.
I guess there's a threshold for anything. However, I would argue that it just means that you can fail and fail over and over again and still be willing to drive through to what you
Right.
think your result is. And are you able to learn from each failure so that you get incrementally better each time?
Yeah. You know, I heard a story about Thomas Edison. I didn't know the guy personally. It was before my time, right? But I heard that Edison, like, experimented with, like, hundreds, maybe thousands of different materials before he found the proper element for creating the light bulb, right?
I believe that.
And, you know, like the way the story goes, it was thousands of times, right? And he was asked about this, and he said, you know, it wasn't failures. It was all learning. I learned 1,000 ways or 10,000 ways not to make a light bulb, right? That's kind of important.
That's failure tolerance.
Okay,
Yeah.
good enough.
I think failure, like when you say failure, I thought Mike said something. When you say failure, I feel like it has such a negative connotation.
All right,
So then when I say
right.
something like failure tolerance,
Yeah.
someone's like, oh, it's someone who's just willing to be crappy.
Yeah.
Which is not the case, I think.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people never become good because they're too afraid to fail.
Yeah, and they're just stuck in mediocrity and what they consider comfort at the time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Okay. So next question. All right. I'm going to give you a little. No, I'm not going to give you a preamble. I'll explain the question after you answer it. All right. Would you rather be dead or red in the head?
What is red in the head considered?
Okay. Good. Right. So when I was a kid growing up, I had the superfecta of loser. Right. I was the superfecta of loser. I was a fat kid. I had red hair. I had glasses. I was always moving to a new community because my dad was on the corporate merry-go-round, and I was I already said I was fat. I had like zits and braces and glasses, and I was red-haired. Right now, you wouldn't know it from the screen today, but I used to have a lot of red hair. Right, and people would come up to me in the hallway and they'd say, "I'd rather be dead than red in the head."
I'd rather be red in the head than dead.
I would too.
Also, the biggest part of that, even though I think that nothing's wrong with being red in the head, I also don't want to admit that I'm wrong about never being able to die to you. So that's like the big reason, I'd say.
Hey, Dan.
Yes.
Dan, I'm pretty sure you're going to die. And so you say no, so you won't mind answering this question.
I'm still winning this bet.
Okay, that's fine.
Every
that's
day.
Fine.
Every day I wake up.
But you won't be afraid to answer this question then. When you die, can I preach your funeral?
Absolutely.
Okay, good enough. Yeah, you got that, producer Mike?
Yeah.
That's a hard commit. Okay, good man. So yeah, like I'd rather be dead than red in the head. And people, like here's notes time, kids, right? Get your pencils out. People will always be looking for a way to undermine you, even if you're good, even if you're lucky, right?
I would say especially if you're good and lucky.
Yeah.
But especially if you're good.
Yeah, they will. And I mean, maybe kids like to cut other kids up because they're so afraid of like where they stand in like the hierarchy
For sure.
or what. I don't know. But like I said, I had the superfecta of loser going for me. And I was always at the bottom of the stack.
Superfecta.
It was
I
bad.
did too, if it makes you feel any better. I just didn't have red hair.
Yeah, it doesn't matter because I knew they were wrong, and I don't know how I knew that, but I knew they were wrong. Like how can I take you seriously when you say, "Oh, you're a loser because you have red hair"? I'm like, that doesn't make any sense to me. It didn't make any sense to me when I was 7 years old. It still doesn't make any sense to me. So, you know, people will always be trying to find a way to undercut you, right? And you think about like my pal Sweets, like we dig on him all day long. We troll him without mercy, right? But the one thing Sweets does is he keeps coming back, right? And
You gotta respect that.
yeah, I don't know if I respect it, but
Jeez, poor Sweets.
But okay, I'll respect the fact he keeps coming back. I don't respect the fact that he does not change anything, right? You know, he's still like not hitting the gym. He's not eating properly. He's not asking the right questions. He's definitely not giving the right answers.
Well,
and by the way, Sweets, if you ever listen to this podcast, I love you in spite of it all. Okay. But I do respect you for, you know, coming back to the table just every single day, sometimes multiple times a day, knowing that somebody's going to be getting after your ass.
But maybe Sweets is happy with where he's at.
Yeah, maybe.
Now,
I
if
don't
he's
know.
like, if somebody is complaining, about where they're at constantly and then not changing anything, then I have an issue with it.
Yeah.
If somebody wants to do whatever and they're just happy and they're treating people well and they're doing whatever, and while I might not do something that way,
Yeah.
it's hard to argue with.
Yeah, I guess so, Dan. I don't have a rebuttal on that one. I think I agree with you. Yeah.
Oh, all right. Score one for Sweets.
Wow, Sweets! Somebody just threw you a bone, boy.
I got you, buddy.
Okay, Dan. I'd rather be blind than deaf. Would you rather be deaf or blind?
Well, I am pretty blind. I think I'd rather be blind.
I've never seen you wearing glasses.
I have contacts.
Okay.
And they don't even fully. So, like, the upper limit that you can get is -12 contacts, and that's what I have. But I'm considered, like, technically, like, -14.
Wow.
So I don't
pretty
even
bad.
get to 20/20 with these on. So when you said you had glasses when you were younger, like, my glasses were like
Coke
they,
bottles.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
They're the very epitome of Coke bottle glasses, like
Nice.
exactly what you would think.
Yeah.
My glasses and my hair made up probably most of my body weight.
Wow.
Yeah, because I was like a little stick figure kid, but then I had like huge, like curly hair, and then I
Yeah.
had thick glasses, and it was a wonder that my head didn't hit the ground every time I tried to run.
You were a little top heavy.
A little top heavy. Yeah.
That's awesome, Dan. Look
It
at
was
you now,
interesting.
man.
I know, it was interesting.
So, did that drive you at all? Like,
Yes.
because look at you now. You're lean. You're cut. You're strong. You're fast. You're agile. You're moderately intelligent. I mean,
That's the nicest thing anybody's ever said about me. At least about my intelligence.
Dan, you're above average.
I'll take it.
In pretty much all measurements. Okay.
No, that's hardly true, but I do appreciate it.
But how did you overcome?
That is a really good question. I think it's that's also like a big answer. So I think anytime that anybody has like stuff, like they're in a super awkward stage and they're there for years, and then they don't have as many friends as they would like, and they feel like they're kind of like looked down upon and they don't have a lot of confidence at the time, you can go one of two ways. You can try to improve things and then like maybe understand where more people are coming from and be able to connect with more people, or you can become like super insecure and then just start like disliking everybody, right? And finding reasons why, this happens to me because X, Y, and Z. Does that make sense?
It does.
And I chose,
Yeah.
for the most part, I mean, you always have like little dips as you're trying to improve.
What, like when somebody cuts you off on the road or something?
Yeah. Oh yeah. So I think I chose to go the other way with it and just try to control what I can control. And then
Yeah.
the more friends I started getting, the better I felt about everything. And then you kind of have like confidence boost.
Right,
But it took me a long time, for sure.
Yeah. It's funny you say that. I used to think going into work, probably for 20 years, I was thinking to myself, well, today's the day they're going to discover that I'm the fraud that I am, right? I'm
Imposter syndrome.
Imposter syndrome, man.
I get it all the time.
I wrote the book on that one, right? I was like, I'm totally gonna. Today's the day I'm gonna get fired, okay? And I can't afford to get fired. I got a mortgage. I got mouths to feed, right? And And I would just sort of like, I'd pull into the parking lot and I'd sit in my car for a couple minutes, trying to get myself psyched up to go in and get fired. And I would say, okay, great, I'm going to go in and get fired. Come to my desk, log in, and start checking my emails. I'm like, okay, well, I'll just check emails till they fire me, okay? And so I check one email. I'm like, that's easy. I know the answer to that. Respond to that guy. Here's an update on that thing. I know what's going on there. And, after about 20 minutes of this, the caffeine's kicking in. I'm like, oh, this is stupid. I know what I'm doing here. I'm like banging out answers, and I'm feeling smart again, right? And, maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's just you keep coming back to the table, and like you said, you develop a little bit of empathy for people, right?
For sure.
And all of a sudden, like, maybe you can understand other people's struggles a little bit, right? And maybe you can understand that you're actually good. You're not lucky. You're good, right? I don't know. That's how the math is working out for me on this one.
Because I feel like I haven't had imposter syndrome with every job. It's usually just like, I think jobs that have more responsibility, more things tied to it, people counting on you
Yeah.
and stuff like that. When do you feel like your imposter syndrome kicked in? Like, is there a job that you started to do where you're like, I don't know if I can, you take the job, right? Because you're obviously going to say yes to like a good opportunity, but then is there a job where you said yes, but then in your head you're like, I don't even know if I can do this?
I don't know, Dan. Probably the worst one was when I went to Tampa, and I was a vice president in charge of a major chunk of the business, right? Mm-hmm. And there's no book about how to be a vice president. You don't go to school for that, right? You have to know what you're doing. You have to have the technical grasp. You got to know the business. You got to know people. You got to know customers, and that was bad. It was bad. The imposter syndrome was bad. I did great at the job, but I think it's when you're alone with your thoughts that it's the worst, right? Like when you're in a room and the questions are coming thick and fast, or the situation is evolving in real time. It's a lot easier to have your head in the game. But like when you wake up at 2 a.m, right?
Yes.
And it's just a man in his thoughts, right? That's when it's hard. Right.
I wonder why that is, because that's also when it happens to me. It's like usually like middle of the night, I wake up, or like real early in the morning.
Yeah.
And I'll wake up and I'll sit there, and this is not all the time, but I'll sit there and be like, oh man, I don't know, I shouldn't have done this, or I should do this, and now because we haven't done this, now this is going to go really wrong.
Yeah.
And then it's just like a constant string. But why? Do you think it's like something hormonal at that time?
Beats me.
You know what I'm saying? Because like it's like I feel like it's that time of day.
I don't know, Dan. Maybe it's hormonal, but I know one thing. When I'm feeling that way, if I take action, I feel better, right?
Yeah.
And so maybe, like for me, I think my go-to answer would be, you think it at those times because that's when you're most vulnerable, right? Maybe it's hormonal. Maybe it's because there's nobody to talk to. Maybe it's because everyone else is asleep, and there's few actions you can take.
There's few actions you can take. That is a good point.
But one of the things that I used to do in the past is, I was on the road a lot, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'd be in a hotel room in a foreign country, right? 2 o'clock in the morning, wide awake, thinking negative thoughts. Okay, go to the gym. Go to the hotel gym, grind. Okay, that always worked. Turn on your computer and start banging out some emails, right? Lob a couple grenades. That's action, right? Throw a couple grenades and see if you get any response. I used to call it fishing. Right?
Yeah.
I'd go fishing with grenades, right? I'd throw out a controversial statement in an email and see if anybody would latch on to that. And then I felt better, right? Not because of what I said, just the fact that I did something, any kind of an action. Right, so
that's a good point.
Yeah, so sometimes now when I wake up, like I always keep a pad of paper by the bed, right? Because I wake up and I had a dream. I want to remember what that dream was, so I'll write it down, just a little one-liner. Or like worst case scenario, I'm launched into a thought storm.
Yeah,
and I'm like in full mode for 90 minutes, until there's nothing left, and I'll just sit there and like scribe down stuff for 90 minutes.
Do you keep a journal regularly?
Every day.
That's what I need to start doing.
Yeah.
I read a book and it went over like, it's called Tools for Titans. Is it for? Tools of Titans. That's what it is.
Like gigantic hammers, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it tried to find like what really successful people. So your billionaires, like a lot of your really successful high dollar millionaires, like what that own multiple companies or have like had huge success in a specific industry or a sport or whatever. And it tried to dial into stuff that they did and what their routine was, and then tried to pick parts of it. Like it tried to pick out like what books would they recommend and what's like the most recommended book by the most of them, like by a bunch of them, or like what the top 3 or 5. There was even a list of at the end, I think like 50 books.
The bibliography.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah.
And then it was like, what do they do in the morning? One of the big things that almost all of them did was keep a journal.
Yeah, my journals are like tend to be like this. If you guys are looking at that, I don't know if you can see that, but it's just like one-liners.
Yeah.
Right. But it's great because journals are fun. They help you clarify your ideas. Some people can write like sentences. I can't. All I can do is like make lists. And my journals look like lists.
Yeah,
right?
I think a lot of them said that same thing, actually.
And it's not lists necessarily of things I want to do. It's lists of thoughts that I had.
Do you
Okay.
meditate? Because that was another one that either like meditation or like some kind of like still thinking.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes,
Or
I
like-
do. So I do prayer, right?
Okay.
And sometimes that involves nothing at all. Sometimes it is literally just sitting there and breathing and waiting for the voice to come, right?
Right.
And it's weird because like it's not a voice like you and I are talking and we can hear each other's voices. It's like it's hard to describe. But yeah, something happens, right? Like whether it's meditation or prayer or mindfulness or whatever, something definitely happens, right? At least
Yeah.
it does to me. And I think it does to everyone if you get into the discipline. So yeah.
That was the big three where the journal, some kind of like meditation, thinking / breath work. Mm-hmm. And then the last one was, can you guess it?
Probably something to do with nutrition and fitness.
Yep, exercise.
Yeah, exercise,
Yep.
Yeah, so Dan, speaking of exercise, man, that's a winner. That one always pays off. I came in the lab the other day. I got my ass kicked hard. I came in here, probably honestly feeling 4 out of 5. And
That's really high for you.
and we had a meeting of the minds. We sang Kumbaya and shit. And man, I got my ass kicked hard. But it was like hard to sit, hard to stand, hard to walk. So later that day, I went out and walked a couple miles, right, just to flush out the
It's
lactate.
good to move around when you're
It's-
sore.
Yeah, right. I'd rather be sore than sorry, Dan.
That's what they say.
But I asked you a question a minute ago. We never got to the answer. Would you rather be blind or deaf? And I think you said I'd rather be blind, but
Yeah.
we didn't really go anywhere with that.
I think I would. I mean, that's a very tough question. The only reason I think I'd say that right off is just because I've been like fairly blind. Mm-hmm. Although like seeing like really cool sights is amazing.
Yeah.
But I also think that I've never been deaf and I don't know anything. I couldn't speak on that at all. However, like when you say I all of a sudden become deaf, or like I have to be born one of the two ways.
I think I'm going like the genie pops in front of you and says, "Okay, pick one." Sorry,
Yeah,
it's not your day, Dan. You're going to lose something today.
Yeah, I'd probably pick blind
Yeah.
for sure. So I also think, like I like listening to sounds. I like hearing people talk. I like to speak to people a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And the longer that you're deaf, the harder it is to understand. Like, I'd imagine your own voice and your tone and everything. So even if you were communicating a different way, like you'd almost have to communicate with just written word, which I guess would be easier in today's time. It's a tough one, man.
I don't know.
I mean, you give something up regardless, and then you probably do like start to get better at some other stuff. That's one like that's one I'd have to have like I'd ask for a free trial. You know, I'd be like, well, can I do a week with both and then make a decision? Likely they'd say no, but maybe I could get a free trial out of it.
So it just occurs to me, like here we are talking, and I don't know if the crowd can hear the ambient noise going on in the background. There's people working out.
Yeah.
And Dan, without even looking at them, I think you and I both know exactly where they are in the gym right now and
Yeah.
exactly what they're doing, right? Because we can hear them. We're not even thinking about it, but we know exactly where they're standing. and
Yeah,
what
because
they're-
I heard
yeah.
some soft crying, and then I could tell that Paul was doing RFEs. You know, just like anybody would when they're doing RFEs.
Okay. So I'm gonna. Okay, fair enough, Dan.
Well,
I will.
hey, since you brought Paul up, do you want to do any shout-outs?
Not to Paul. He's crying.
Shout out to Paul for doing RFEs in volume over there, for sure. Shout out to CNA Auto, my buddy Adam over there and his crew. Anything that you ever got going on with your car, whether it be on fire, you lost a wheel, engine falls apart, or just like some common maintenance, go to CNA Auto, tell them I sent you, ask for Adam and his crew, and they'll take care of you.
That's awesome. I'd like to shout out to producer Mike, because without producer Mike, this podcast doesn't happen, man. We have no microphones. We have no cameras. We got no tech. We got no brains. Mike is the glue that holds us together.
He really
Dan and
is.
I are just a couple of talking heads, but Mike is the brains of the operation. So thanks, producer Mike. You're the man.
I second that.
So rather blind than deaf. Yeah, I'm with you. I'd if I had to pick, I'd go blind.
How would we podcast otherwise?
It would be a different podcast, that's for sure.
If we're blind, we can still podcast. If we're deaf, we'd have to learn a bunch of stuff first.
So, people consider these to be liabilities or disabilities, right?
Right.
The loss of a major sense, or the loss of a limb, or the loss of freedom, or whatever. I don't know.
So I gotta continue with what you're saying. Then I have
Yeah.
something very that I feel very strong about.
So my friend Dobkin used to say, your disability is your opportunity, right? And yeah, I generally agree with that. I think it's a chance to reframe how you approach the world.
Yeah.
Right. And how you approach life, or what you prioritize, or
And
whatever.
usually other
right?
senses improve.
Yeah.
And when I say other senses, so there's arguments to be like what your senses are, right?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously you have hearing, taste, or touch, smell,
Yeah.
seeing.
Yeah.
Right. So like you have your normal five senses, but then I also think that there's arguments for like spatial awareness, timing, stuff like that of that nature. And so when I've always been blind. But my parents did not figure it out until I was like 4 or 5.
Okay.
So they just thought that I was just not very smart, which they were right about. But I was smarter than they originally thought.
Smarter than your average bear.
Smarter than their average Dan, I guess.
Yeah.
So they thought that I was just like, I guess not cognitively there. But then they were like, oh no, the doctor was like, he's just very blind. He needs to have glasses. And I was like, I guess I was like, okay. And then I had glasses, and all of a sudden I could do all sorts of stuff.
Whole new world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think because of that, like two senses that, because I thought about this at a young age. I was like, well, I don't feel like I have a better sense of smell than everybody. I don't have a better sense of hearing. I definitely don't have better sight. So, but I think that like my best skills were probably like the three that really improved the most were my sense of spatial awareness and like knowing where people were at all times. Even like in sport and athletics and stuff. Timing, like I have, for whatever reason, I have a very, and maybe probably because of that, I have a really good sense of timing. And then touch, like those three I could tell like actually did are like more improved than most people, I would say.
And your sense of smell?
It's the same, I guess.
Yeah.
There's no like
no enhancements there.
no. I know many people that can have like better sense of smell than I do.
Well, it makes sense, and it resonates with my own experience, because I was and still am largely blind, right? But one of the things I learned was you can know an awful lot about something without seeing the details.
For
right?
sure.
And I learned to recognize people by the way they moved and the shape of their body, right? Like, oh, okay, that tall person over there moving this certain way, that's my dad. He's walking away from me, and I could do that, and I still can do that, right? So there's something else going on there. The way you kind of, the way you process the information, right?
It also stops you from like running into stuff so much or like falling.
Yeah.
Like I don't fall very often. I don't like run into stuff. I mean, you run into stuff just like anybody else would, but not nearly as much.
Right,
Like
right.
for example, who has really good eyesight? Logan does.
Does Logan run into stuff all the time?
All the time. And he's a good athlete. Like he's coordinated. He just, I think, he's never had to think like that. So he smashes into stuff all the time.
Yeah.
He's broken more things just like walking around as a normal human than anybody else I've ever seen.
Come
in my
on,
life.
Logan.
I'm telling you.
So Dan, here's a zinger for you then.
Yeah.
I went to a TED Talk a couple years ago.
Oh, cool.
And one of the speakers was Haben Girma, okay? Haben, Haban, Girma, Grima. Haben Girma was the first deaf-blind graduate of Harvard Law School.
God bless.
I know, right? And she got up on the stage and told her story, right? And wow, what a story that was.
Yeah.
And she was hilarious.
That's
right?
awesome.
So I'm like, I have to meet this person. So of course, between talks during the intermissions, you can mingle and you can like talk to these people. And so here's Haben Girma, like standing by herself, not entirely by herself, but I was like, I'm going to go and talk to her. And it was so cool talking to her because she could not hear my question. She had an aide with her who would type the question onto a real-time mechanical braille machine, right? And so Haben Girma would sit there with her fingers on this machine, and her aide would type the question, and the braille would scroll across the panel.
Oh, that's so cool.
Right, like a tactile mechanical braille reader.
Yeah.
Right, and so I asked the question, like, so you went to Harvard. How did you like Boston in the winter? Right. So I didn't want to ask her questions about her disabilities or her other abilities, as Dobkin would say. I just wanted to ask. I wanted to relate to her as like an ordinary person, and she was like, "Oh man, it was so cold. It was so cold for so long." But you know what? The club scene in Boston is awesome, and I'm like, tell me about clubbing as a deaf-blind person. And she's like, it's awesome because, first of all, you don't see anything, but you feel everything, right?
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah.
the thump of the bass.
Yeah.
And she said, you could dance like nobody's looking because you didn't know if anyone was looking. You didn't even know if anybody was there, right?
That's amazing.
And it was so much fun. And she had more and more stories about that. But she was just a super regular person, and it was really interesting. So I think deaf or blind, you adapt, you improvise, you overcome, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm with you. I'd rather be blind than deaf because
I think so.
I like the music too much. Mm-hmm. But as Haben Girma tells us, you can still like the music.
Yeah, maybe
even if
you
you're
start
deaf.
liking the bass.
Yeah. Let's see here. Dan, would you rather be muddy or inside?
I guess it depends on the temperature and like what's going on, but overall, I'd rather be muddy.
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah.
I think that comes right into like what we were saying before. Like, do you want to take the opportunity and see where it goes? And maybe you're like head to toe in mud and you don't really go anywhere.
Yeah.
Or maybe you're head to toe in mud and you had the greatest time of your life.
Yeah.
One of the two.
Yeah. I know people that value comfort, right? And they love to be inside. If it's rainy and cold, they want to be inside, wrapped up in a blanket with like a bowl of soup or a mug of tea or something.
Oh, I have to say, I'm if it's cold and rainy,
Yeah.
put me inside. I don't do the cold.
Yeah.
You could convince me, Alex, because you're a very convincing guy. But the cold for me is if it was cold all the time, right? If every day was cold, right? Even if you couldn't get used to it, then I would figure it out.
Yeah, you would.
But because then you got to do something, right? But otherwise, like if it's cold plus rainy, it's not like we have like a ton of those days. So that's a day that Dan's staying inside. I don't
Really?
pick comfort a lot of times, but that is a time I would pick comfort.
Yeah, I'm not that guy.
I know that.
I would rather be cold. I would rather be muddy than indoors.
For the most part, I would not in that scenario.
So if you talk to Agent B, she will tell you that there have been probably more occasions than she can count where we would either have a forecast of rain or there would be thunder, and I would announce, "This is great. I'm going for a run." Right?
Running in a thunderstorm is super cool.
It is.
I don't know how smart it is, but it is super cool.
It's not smart. Okay, let's just leave it at that. It's not smart at all.
Well, luckily, I never pretend to be. And I just want to be consistent,
I mean, the lucky guy will go and do this anytime, right? The good guy might think twice about going out and running in a thunderstorm. Okay, Dan. Here's my last question. Are you familiar with the Stanford marshmallow experiment?
I am not, but I am interested. I
Okay.
hate marshmallows.
Okay, so the Stanford marshmallow experiment is conducted by a guy named Mischel in 1970 at Stanford University, and it was a psychological experiment, basically on the premise of delayed gratification, right? So they would say they would sit the kid down with a marshmallow and then 2 marshmallows, right? And they'd say, "Okay, kid, you can have 1 marshmallow now, But if you wait, you can have 2 marshmallows. And some kids would pick 1 marshmallow now, and other kids would wait, right? So what are you? Are you 1 marshmallow now, or are you like 2 marshmallows later?
How hungry am I?
Come on, Dan.
See,
Like, I'm trying to ask you a basic
I know you
question.
are. I know, but you know what? A great man once said there are no basic questions. I think you said there's no simple questions.
I think
Maybe no simple answers.
I think
Whatever.
I said there's lots of stupid questions.
Maybe. Well, maybe I'm putting my own spin on it. But I feel like with this, wouldn't it just depend on, wouldn't it be situational? I'd rather operate in the gray area there. I don't want to black and white that question, right? So, like, let's say it's not a marshmallow because I hate marshmallows, because I would choose neither.
Yeah.
In fact, you know what? I would choose later, get 2 marshmallows, and then I would barter them from something else.
Of course you would.
But that's not fair because I don't like marshmallows. However, if they were, I love chocolate.
Okay.
Chocolate chip cookies. I love chocolate chip cookies.
Two little Hershey
Yeah.
wraps, those
Okay.
little nuggets they've got, right? 1 now or 2 later.
If I'm just at a norm,
Yeah.
I'll take the 2 later.
Uh-huh.
If I really want something sweet, I just ate something, I just want something sweet, give me the 1 now because I know I want it now. Like, I have that temptation now. Later, I don't know if I want those, right? And then instead of having 2 chocolates, I had 1. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So,
it's
a little healthier.
It's really hard, isn't it? Yeah, and you're right.
It's so situational.
It is so situational.
Yeah.
And I didn't really think about that. My gut response was I'm definitely a 2 marshmallows later guy. And
Maybe overall with most things. But
Yeah.
again, I feel like people will look at that study, and then the kids that select 1 marshmallow or the 1 marshmallow are looked down upon, right? Because they're like, oh, these kids are not looking to the future. Well, who knows how hungry those kids are? Or if they're just like, I would rather just have 1. Maybe they're like portioning it off.
Yeah.
And like, well, I was going to only eat 1 marshmallow anyway. Give me the 1 marshmallow.
Well, what about kids that grew up with untrustworthy environments, right? Like, oh, you say you'll give me 2, but I don't believe you.
That's fair too.
Yeah.
There's a lot of nuances to this question that you're asking here.
So
What does Stanford say?
Well, Stanford says you learn a lot by this experiment, right?
Okay.
You learn what motivates people, right? The Stanford experiment doesn't try to say one is better than the other. It tries to understand why kids would pick one or the other.
Did the kids ask?
And that's exactly what you're saying. What is motivating the kid? What is their context?
So they asked the kids afterwards what they're...
No, they I don't remember what they did afterwards, right? I mean, I took Psych 101 like 40 years ago, so
I had the
don't
worst Psych
remember.
101 teacher ever.
Yeah.
I had this guy in community college that... So I feel like 101 are like... Get the kids into... Like, some of them are just like taking them... You have to take like 101 psych class for gen ed, right? And then if you like it, then it's like, do you want to start taking a psych path? So those 101 classes, to me, if you're teaching them, you should be like... I am going to teach like the base knowledge of this and see if I can get kids excited in this path and see if I can get some kids to go down the psychology pathway, right? Because it should be something you're passionate about. This guy instead wrote his own psychology book, so I guess that he was excited about this. Created his own grading system for this. It was one of the hardest classes I've ever taken in my whole life. I just withdrew because I couldn't stand it. You could not get a B in the class. You couldn't get an A in the class. You started with an E, so you started like failing, right? And the best you could do was a B, unless you did a quarter-long, like really intense research project. And then if you got everything right, plus did that in a perfect way, then you could get an A.
Yeah.
Which is, for a 101 class, like, get out of here.
Yeah, that doesn't seem like it's worth 2 marshmallows later.
No, that's not worth it.
I'll just take one. I'll take my 1
circle.
marshmallow and withdraw.
Jeez, man. Yeah, sorry. It just reminded me of that.
No, that's okay.
And
Everybody's
I feel like
got triggers, Dan.
that should be a cool class. Because psychology is, it's very interesting.
Sure.
So the human mind, I mean, what's more interesting than that? That might be a little arrogance, being that I'm human. As far
There's
as
not
I know.
many things more interesting than what makes us human, right? So I don't know where to go with that one, Dan. I'm unprepared as usual.
No worries.
Producer Mike, how are we doing time-wise? Do we have a full podcast yet? Okay. So Dan, I'm out of stuff. Is there anything you want to say?
No, I just want you to be aware that I'm still ahead in our bet. I woke up today. I'm still alive as far as I know. This
Yeah.
doesn't feel like any kind of purgatory or hell or heaven in any way. So,
I don't know, man.
Mike, I
Thanks,
don't,
Mike.
I don't know where you stand in all this. I'm just thankful that you're producing all this nonsense
Yeah.
for the rest of eternity.
All right, Dan. Well, thanks for another awesome podcast. It's always fun talking to you.
Hey, man, it's time to win, and you're the man, Alex.
It's definitely time to win, but I'm just some guy.
Thank you, guys.
Ciao.